as a character that was sort of a counterpoint to Spider-Man's wisecracking, or was he going sort of and how did it affect you as an actor and as a person in the film?
Well, I wanted we wanted Electro to be serious. I wanted him to be a formidable opponent. Even when I was seeing Andrew out, I saw him at Chelsea Pier and I said, somebody really doesn't like him. And I
don't speak like that.
So I told him, I said, I really want Electro to be angry. And I actually got the character from something that happened to me when I was in LA as a young comedian. I had a little situation. There was this gangster dude that said, if you ever need some help, let me know. And I needed his help one day, and I took the help, but then I was indebted to him. So every club I went to, you got me, right? And I was like, yeah, I need to get in the club with you. I said, I can only get one, and I got 9 with me. And I was like, so it was just this constant thing going through the city to finally have to stand up and say, hey, I don't want to deal with you anymore. And then it turned on sort of this venom. So I took that character as Electro, and when Spider-Man says to Max, we're partners, and he said it in passing, but I took it to heart. So when I turn into Electro, I don't want to let him off the hook. And I think that's what works. It makes the fight more epic. The fact that Electro is not talking a lot, he's just down to business, he wants to burn the city down, and he wants to get rid of Spider-Man.
And a lot of actors who play iconic villains, sometimes they say it's fun for them, while others have a very different effect. They say it was very disturbing to them. How did it affect you? When all said and done, I'm traveling.
Well, what I wanted to do, what we wanted to do is we wanted to do 3 things as Max. We wanted to have 3 things happen. He needs to be betrayed by love. He needs to be betrayed by family. He needs to be betrayed by his work. So that when you see the setup, when you see him as Max, and is it okay if I say what happens to him when they forget his birthday?
No.
Okay. Well, what happens is that we came up with the fact that Max Dillon, it's his birthday, and even his mom doesn't remember his birthday. So see how you feel. But that sets it up. The fact that he says, "Mom, it's a very special day today. You got anything you want to say?" She says, "No, I don't want to say anything to you." So what that does is that sets it up that when Electro does turn into this guy, there's a little bit of you saying, "I understand where it's coming from." So it wasn't disturbing, but it was great to see that journey. The fact that we gave it more than one side. It's 3 to 4 dimensional. That when he turns into this person, you understand where he's coming from.
Okay.
This question's for Marc, Matt, Ali. A little bit bummed that Shailene Woodley's not going to appear in this movie, as we heard, but excited about the idea of a longer-term plan. Does Shailene still have the part for Spider-Man 3, and would the scene have to be completely reworked, or a similar version of what was going to be?
We miss Shailene, and I know you will understand that we all felt the story got just too big to have 2 girls. We always get this complaint, too many this, too many that, so it was the right thing to wait with it. The next movie will be in 3 years from now, more or less. 45.
Yeah, we haven't crossed that bridge, so we just got to finish this movie first.
We love this girl, and time will tell.
Yes, Andrew. Coming back to this sequel, doing this the second time around, is it still hard to be a Parker and easier to be Spider-Man, or has it gotten difficult being Spider-Man as well?
Oh, what a question. I like that question. I think what I discovered on this one is that it's just a mess. Peter's a mess, Spider-Man's a mess. But what's important to note is that when we meet Spider-Man at the beginning of this film, he's taking great pleasure in his power, and he's in full control of it. A little bit like Usain Bolt. His 25 minutes before he runs the 100 meters is his preparation is play, because he has the ability to do that. He accesses a very relaxed, free, playful state of mind, and so what I love about this Spider-Man now is that he has the confidence to not only be heroic, but it's not boring heroism. He's able to mess with people as he's being heroic. He's Bugs Bunny to a certain degree. And also, what I discovered is that Peter is his little brother in a way. He's in the shadow. Spider-Man gets all the power, the attention, and he gets to live out his fantasy life. But when he gets home, Peter has the bangs and the bruises and the aches and the pains. When the adrenaline has left his body, he has to look in the mirror and he has to see a real boy in the mirror as opposed to this symbol that's greater than any human being. So that dynamic was really, really interesting. This inner dynamic between the older brother and the younger brother. And it's complicated as it should be. Peter Parker has historically been complicated, and the more complicated, the better. The more guilt, the better. The more pain, the better for Peter, and the more joy and pleasure for Spider-Man, the better. So those two things were really fun to play.
For Andrew, what was the most important lesson that you learned coming out of the first movie as an actor into getting into this character, which is something that has helped you now in the second film?
Thank you for the question. Gosh, I learned so much from that first movie. I didn't really sleep on the first movie. I really took the responsibility to heart. I took Stan Lee's words to heart. And I still do. So I guess what I tried to do on this one is make sure that I could show up every day and give all of myself to it. Because there were certain days where I was on the first one where I felt like I couldn't get to the place I wanted to get to emotionally, or I couldn't get to the place I wanted to get to physically, or I just felt burnt out. And so on this one I really wanted to treat myself like an athlete and take rest when I could. And luckily in this one I could. Because Alex Kurtzman and Bob Orsi, with the help of Marc, Matt, and the whole team, and Avi, had crafted a story that didn't solely rest upon Peter's shoulders, or Spider-Man's shoulders. Alex and Bob, they wrote incredibly well-crafted characters across the board, a real ensemble, and enough to attract talent like this, and Paul Giamatti. And it's a real testament to the writing, and I got to sleep a little bit more, thankfully.
This is a question for Andrew. This time around, we see you get to wear a more traditional Spider-Man costume. How did you like getting to wear the new costume, and which one do you like more?
The eyes are much bigger and better. You can see more. It's still as tight as it was before. I was able to urinate in this one easier. That was a very friendly adjustment from the costume designer Deb Scott. Aesthetically, I prefer it. To be honest, I dig it more. I just dig it more. I love the first one. Don't get me wrong. I actually really did. But it's mostly my ability to urinate, which I'm happy about. It was just very generous of them to set it up in that way.
What was your Spider-Man experience like, and what was it like working with talent?
Honestly, I didn't know what to expect going into it because I had never made a movie this big. But I definitely wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did and walk away being as fulfilled as I was. I knew going into it that I was a big fan of Andrew and the first movie, and Andrew as an actor, and Jamie obviously, and what Marc Webb had done with his first two movies. But I thought because of the magnitude of the movie, something artistically would be compromised. But actually, it was a great luxury to have that much time, and for the sets to be that amazing. And then with the script being as great as it was, I walked away fully satisfied.
And Metallica?
Yeah, and Metallica was awesome too.
For Marc, second time around, what were the elements of the Spider-Man character and story, some of the great positions that you couldn't get to in the first one that you were really excited to be able to give some time second time around?
Well, I think that there's a level of virtuosity in his physical capabilities that we really had fun playing around with. And there was a foundation of playfulness in this movie that There was hints of it in the first movie, but like, fun is crucial. And I think, the first movie we had a lot of obligations. It was a little darker, and this one was, from the outset, has that level of play that I loved in Spider-Man growing up. And we did a lot of there's a lot of things that we did. For example, like just the physical comedy elements of it, which are very technical, very difficult. We had a guy that Andrew had suggested, Cal McChrystal, who came in and consulted with us in creating these kind of really sort of elaborate, simple, but elegant sequences where Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is having fun being Spider-Man. And I think physical comedy is something that's sort of a lost art. You know what I mean? And Andy Armstrong, Cal, and I, we all went back and looked at a lot of Buster Keaton movies, a lot of Charlie Chaplin, a lot of Harold Lloyd, and you look at these incredibly gifted artists and engineers back then, and how difficult the physical tasks of comedy like that was. It was something that we wanted to mess around with. There's a few scenes that we did where we had to do some long takes. There was that one we did in the hallway that was, I think, I don't know how many takes we did, but it was just like incredibly demanding of Andrew. But also intensely pleasurable as a filmmaker. I think people will appreciate that. Whether they notice the level of detail or the work that we put into it, I don't know. But that was something that was really fun to play around with that we didn't get to play around with in the first movie.
This question's for Jamie. You play a lot of iconic roles. First you had Ray Charles that you knocked out of the park, then you had Django last year. How do you feel taking on this type of role, considering it's completely different, and what did you do to prepare for it?
First of all, it was just, I think the nailing of Max is the main thing. I know people like Max. There was a guy named Rashad who lived with his mom in his 40s, and if you know the history of Max, his father left him. He was actually married at one point. We don't go into that. He was actually married at one point, and the reason being is because he couldn't get going. And so for an actor, that's perfect for guys like us. There's a building block right there. If you know that this guy's lost his father, immediately there's something about his character that's different. If you know that his mother dotes over him all the time, he's always seeking his mom's approval, which is a little bit like mine. I was adopted at 7 months. My mother, I knew though at the time, so I would always wait for her to come into town, and I'm playing quarterback, and I'm this and I'm that, and I was waiting for her to say I like that. And she was a very tough woman. She now lives with me now. Everything's worked out. I don't want to make it depressed, but at that time, that was tough for me because I wanted her approval. So the same with Max. And if we could grab that for us as actors, and what was great about Marc is that once we set that platform of Max being from that, the electro part was not easy, but it makes sense. But what was great is that Marc would not allow us to move until he actually got it right. He pushed, I don't know what you guys experienced, but he pushed me. I don't know if he pushed me a little harder than everybody else, but he pushed, and I really appreciated that, so that when we look back on what we shot, that's the main ingredient from all of the characters that we played, whether it's Ray, whether it's Django or Willie Beeman. That's the same DNA or the same process that we've used in all of our character work.
There's a lot of great merchandise and different things like that surrounding this movie and Spider-Man as a brand. But I wanted to know, Andrew, specifically, what's it like to see yourself as an action figure? See yourself as
I try not to look, but then I went into Toys R Us before Christmas time, last Christmas, shopping for my nephews. And I was like, I'll meet you guys in the car. I needed just a half an hour to just kind of absorb one particular aisle. And it was humbling, just really, really humbling, and not something that I really identify with. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like me. But it's really cool. It's just cool. Like it's just as simple as that, really. But also it doesn't really mean anything, weirdly. You know, it's the suit. You know, kids are going to be excited to buy the Spider-Man figure when he's got his mask on. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, people identify with Peter Parker, but it's not about the actor playing the role. It's about the everyman nature of Peter and the everyman nature of Spider-Man, and what he stands for and who he protects. All creatures great and small. And that's what's exciting. And the fact that I get to try to embody it and try to bring it to life for 5-6-year-olds, that's just an honor for me, and one that I don't take lightly, or that personally, actually.
Marc, with this bigger Spider-Man world and the sequels announced, was it harder to make this film feel contained rather than a way to get to the next sequel?
No, I think those are different things. I mean, the universe that we had conceived of began before we started shooting the first movie. So there are plans and seeds that had sort of developed all around us. But the primary focus was just executing this movie really as best we all could. Contained is an interesting word. I mean, this is operatic. There is a hugeness of scale to this movie, and as Andrew was saying, the ensemble I think is pretty extraordinary, but it is cohesive and it is direct, and I think there is a simple unifying theme that is at the heart of the film that I think I think will be very impactful. But it was fun. It's fun to like tease out little bits and pieces of other characters, and if you pay attention to this next movie, you'll see other things that might be in store for us in the future.
For Dane, I saw Kill Your Darlings. Amazing performance. Congratulations.
Thanks.
In the previous incarnation, I mean, the actors have changed. We had, James Franco playing the same character. And a lot of what kind of drove him was what happened to his father, and it kind of turned him. I would presume that there's a different trajectory here. Can you just talk a little bit about how you interact with Peter Parker and your character?
Yeah, well, first off, in this version, Peter and Harry were childhood friends. And then Harry was sent off to a boarding school at kind of a young age, and because he inherently has a complicated relationship with Norman still, he never really went home, and he kind of stopped. He kind of just ignored his home life and stayed at school and partied and, probably got into a lot of things he shouldn't have gotten into, and started to try to buy his happiness because he had kind of trust fund, and now he's graduated high school and he's decided to go home for the first time, and he has to confront Peter, and he hasn't seen Peter in a really long time, and they are trying to reconcile their friendship, and I think a lot of what they find that they have in common is their complicated relationships with their fathers still.
Do you interact more with Max or with Electra? Do you guys have any interaction?
We have some interactions.
Yes. Yeah.